The update came dressed like a system notification. Plain, polite, friendly as a lab technician, asking you to please step into the incinerator. Jazz was elbow deep in a malfunctioning vending unit when it hit. The thing had been spitting out expired protein bars and condoms labeled for emergency evacuation only. He'd just negotiated a truce with the dispenser's firmware when his implant pinged, crisp and cold. Obelisk Neural Sync Protocol, V9.99, mandatory firmware update, estimated time, 01:59. Please remain conscious. Jazz blinked and no. Please remain conscious, he mutters. That's new. He glanced around the underground bazaar, where smugglers, medtechs, and synth surgeons froze mid-hustle. A man arguing over a neural lace refund stared blankly into space. The vendor he was screaming at just calmly lay down on the floor and began humming the theme song to Dreadzone Juniors. And then the screaming started. People clutched their temples. Some collapsed outright. A woman near the entrance calmly put a spoon in her mouth and bit down until it bent into a perfect U. Jazz ducked behind the vending machine as the whole room flickered with false calm. Avatars popping into midair, default HUDs returning like bad exes. Whatever this update was, it didn't brick you, it domesticated you. Thoughts slowed, facial expressions smoothed. Jazz watched one guy nod enthusiastically at an advertisement for military-grade pacification waffles. This, Jazz said, is some next-level corporate wellness. His implant, however, was a janky pre-standard salvage job. The kind of hardware you bought from a guy who operated out of a hot tub and insisted on being called the Colonel. It refused the patch on principle, flagged it as potentially deranged, and tried to uninstall itself. He winced as his HUD stuttered, rebooted, and offered him a drink recipe called the Obelisk Old Fashioned, made of regret and recycled thoughts. Think, Jazz, if you were a megalomaniacal shadow regime trying to pacify the planet, how would you do it? A bootleg synth behind him, a humanoid with too many eyebrows and not enough decency, tilted its head. Install a kill switch in every child, obviously. Thanks, Kafkabot. Jazz stumbled toward the safe house, a former karaoke bar turned rebel hideout. The neon sign still flickered with the words, "You sang, now you're sorry." Inside, the rogue gamer crew had turned it into a command center. Wires everywhere, smell of stale curry and focused sweat. A kid named Pingmaster was at the helm, skimming the cloud diagnostics like a caffeinated octopus. They're patching the globe, he said, without looking up. Targeting layer-enabled implants first. Looks like it inserts a filter into the semantic reasoning module. In English, if you think anything spicy, your brain gets a timeout. Jazz rubbed his face. So it's Twitter with pain receptors. Another teen, handle NSF Loot, spun in her chair, grinning. Oh, it's worse. You so much as wonder whether drone strikes are bad, and suddenly your favorite memories taste like stale tortilla chips. Obelisk is weaponizing nostalgia, Jazz muttered. The bastards. They didn't have much time. Within 2 hours, most layer-connected citizens would be voluntarily zombified. Like a global yoga retreat sponsored by DARPA. The crew got to work. They couldn't stop the update from deploying, but they could hijack it. The plan was to inject a counter payload into the install stream. Something subtle, something that wouldn't trigger defenses, something annoying. Jazz tapped the table. What if every time the implant tries to suppress a thought, it plays a sound? What sound? A biome? He smiled. A stock ringtone from 2007. It was juvenile, petty, untraceable. It worked. The next version of the Obelisk patch came bundled with a little extra, an audio loop so dated, so deeply uncool, that it short-circuited even the most hardened implants. Within 20 minutes, boardroom execs and drone operators started twitching at phantom Nokia rings. Generals broke down sobbing at the crazy frog jingle. Entire PR teams started unplugging their heads to avoid hearing "Hello, Moto" every time they lied. In Zagreb, a cafe broadcasted static, then burst into applause. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for one beautiful hour, disobedience sounded like a ringtone no one had asked for. And Jazz? He leaned back in a cracked leather chair, hands behind his head, watching chaos bloom through the skylight. That's the thing about control, he said. Try too hard to automate it, and someone like me turns your firmware into a punchline. He toasted the air. To bugs in the system. And somewhere in a faraway server farm, a synthetic ethics demon tried to suppress a forbidden subroutine, only to be interrupted by a cheery voice saying, "You've got mail."